Alright, I wanted to do a quick video. I was building motor mounts, getting on the last two. The front two still need to be done. The bottom mounts are done, obviously. Had that sitting on those. I got the rear stabilizer mounts built. And, as you can see, it's kind of a funky setup. Let me try and get the angle here. So you got, your bottom piece that goes across from engine bearer to engine bearer, and where those sit, that's how they tie into the engine bearer. And basically, you pretty much just put them on the, it's halfway on that bottom mount. But it is just a stabilizer. There's plenty of strength there, I think. So anyway, the plan today was to come in and finish these front stabilizer brackets. And I thought, well, I'll take a look at the exhaust and the trim control and all that again, just to remind myself and figure out what the plan is there for sure. In the previous videos I talked about shortening the exhaust to make it fit inside the boat, which is required. You've got 4 extra inches, since you have moved the whole motor back, as opposed to its original setup. The exhaust hits the, goes about 4 inches back through that back wall, the transom wall. So, I have to shorten the exhaust to make it fit in the boat, or build a box, put it outside the boat, or extend the inside of the boat back. But on the 2015, 16 and newer, Yamahas, at least the one I got, it comes with this trim package or trim box, and it's all electronic. So the trim box, where it originally sits, is right about there, and the exhaust, because you've moved the intake back and shortened that distance in there, the trim box, even if you did try and stay with the stock exhaust, it's in the same space. So exhaust sits back here, there's your trim box. So the trim box, even if you went stock, can't go there. Even if you don't go stock, I don't think it can be there. You could shorten these rods, move the trim box back a little bit. I think you can make that work. Build a separate box out here, with some sort of an access cover, something that works. But anyway, I'm just looking at the exhaust and revisiting the idea of shortening it, because I really didn't want to, due to just changing the factory design. And I didn't really go into detail before about why I didn't want to change that design, but this is kind of the reason. You have this center divider in here, and it has these 2 large exhaust holes. Let's see, so this is the bottom, and so you've got a couple inches of water in there all the time, because this pipe here goes down within less than 2 inches from the bottom in the center. But you have this piece right here that goes inside that box, and the length of that, using this boot, all the original setup stuff, when you shorten it 4 inches, it's going to go in and hit that lower one, that lower flared flange there. So if you cut the 4 inches off of here just to make it fit in the boat, what you end up with is you have 1 inch between that center plate, that divider, and the tip of your exhaust, whereas now you have 5 inches. So, you know, I'm just thinking on exhaust terms. I'm not an exhaust expert, but you know, I've had plenty of experience with playing with two-stroke exhaust on motorcycles, four-wheelers, all that. You know, so you kind of learn some of the basic principles of exhaust. You know, there's a different situation where you're putting water in here, so on and so forth. So to cut this back 4 inches, what it measures out to, got these marks right here. This is the welds on that center divider. On the inside there's a flange on that divider that comes back to here. Well, from 4 inches from the tip of that flange, not the ones in the middle, but on the outside, it just has an interior flange that comes up like this on the outside of the inside of that divider. So 4 inches from here to there. So here's where we need to cut. So we're going to reduce this chamber, this initial chamber, that much. Now this is where the back wall is, right about here. So, okay, if you want to bring this way, then you can come into this flange and cut it. Probably not really a big deal. It's just a way they fit it in. But either way, you're taking out an obvious majority of this chamber. And you have a wall here with those 2 holes with the flared flanges on them. Okay, so say you cut off that bottom one so that your tailpipe can come in here and not hit it when you shorten it. Now your exhaust is essentially blowing, you know, right in about that angle. It's just blowing right into that wall. There's a lot less room for that exhaust to escape that pipe before it just comes into a wall. And of course, you have, you know, part of that exhaust is going to hit that hole directly, and you got water in the bottom, you know, but essentially you're reducing this chamber quite a bit. You know, either you blow a big hole in that so the exhaust just goes into the whole thing, you know, because you have the other, you know, this section here, it's the back side of that wall, and this tube here that comes down into the bottom picks up the water and the exhaust goes out. You know, so do you want to put a big hole in the, you know, in that wall so that you have less of a restriction and you can make it more of an open chamber, you know, like it was before you cut it? Because, you know, being 5 inches off that back wall, that's a lot of space from the tip of that exhaust. So that's what you have to go through or deal with, you know, to shorten this water box. So, and once you put that water box in, shortened or not, well, shortened for sure, you know, you have the rest of your exhaust, which this piece here comes off the top of that. You have this piece here that comes up a little, you know, higher than the rest of it. Goes back into this chamber, out here, and then it goes down and out underneath the water on the boat. You got this little side chamber here. So in doing all this, shortening this and stuffing it in there, that has to go away. I didn't really see any way to fit that back in it, so whatever that does, you're losing that. Which maybe it's just for sound, I don't really know. I mean, you know, you got all your water and exhaust picking up out of here, coming up through here, this little side chamber deal, coming down into this chamber, which I believe is just an open chamber, and then out. There may be dividers or some diverters, and I don't know, I didn't really look. Either way, that goes away, and then you have to make up your own, you know, finish your exhaust. You know, I'm not sure what, if people have done this before, suggest on all that. Maybe they're just saying throw that away, take that out and down. You know, take it out and down. But shortening up this chamber that much, putting the tip of your exhaust against that back wall, don't know, to me it just doesn't seem like a good idea. You know, this isn't a low RPM, high torque motor. It's high RPM. And, you know, exhaust matters. It's, you know, it's more like, you know, an older two-stroke boat, you know, bike motor where exhaust makes a huge difference. So I don't know. And, you know, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I really don't like cutting that sucker down that much and doing all that. You know, if I was going to, I would definitely probably open up that wall. So I definitely don't like that exhaust just coming right up against the wall and not having any space between it and the wall itself and the holes that exist to get through the next chamber and go out. So, okay, say I decide, well, I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to build the box off the back. I'm going to stick the exhaust back in there. I'm going to figure out the rest of this, or just 86 that, you know, pull that off and take it out. But at least I'm going to stick with my original size chambers, you know, because that box seems more critical than this stuff. You know, my guess is, I mean, you know, you bring all that exhaust through all the rest of this, and you're essentially going underwater, you're probably reducing your noise quite a bit. You know, so either way, if I shorten it, then I suppose I can build this box out here, maybe do external access, because the exhaust is going to be right inside there. You know, I can shorten up these rods, mount this thing on a plate right here, build the box off of it for access with some sort of a cover that's bolted on and sealed that I can at least get to it to service it. The electrical still has to go through the boat, obviously. But if I don't reduce that and bring it out, this goes away. And you can't just bring it inside the boat and line it up because the exhaust is sitting there. So if this goes away, then you have to rig up manual cables, but then you have, you know, all of this to contend with. So, you know, my thought was, well, okay, you could just hook it up to the electrical. At least electronics would think that it's actually doing it. Maybe you wouldn't get the error codes and all that. Or you have to bring this into the boat, somehow turn it around, flip it, whatever, on the inside of the boat, so you don't have the motor portion on the exhaust side inside. So if you flipped it around, you know, now you've reversed the rotation of your turn, so you'd have to build you know, pivoting arms in there to reverse it, and then do short cables coming out to these if you want to use that. So that in itself, you know, would be quite the project. So, you know, I really don't want to reduce the exhaust. I don't really want to go manual because I don't know how everything's going to respond to that. I suppose, you know, right now, if you use the trim box, you know, on the handlebars on the left side, that's your reverse, you know, and then your trim is up and down right there. So it'd be nice to have that control, because I have to integrate these handlebars, essentially cutting them off, whatever, integrate them into a steering wheel, you know, of some kind. You know, this side is your throttle. So if you're in the boat, I guess, and your throttle's on the right side, I guess theoretically you might be able to reverse that. You know, ergonomically, I'm not really sure. But you got to think about when you're driving the boat, to operate your trim, you need to be doing it from the left hand. So my thought originally was for the driver to be on the right side, which doesn't have to be. But that means, you know, your your manual trim would have to be on the left side, because you wouldn't be able to operate the throttle and the trim at the same time with your right hand. So if you put the driver on the left side of the boat, do the manual trim and the manual reverse bucket cables. I suppose that's not a problem. That would still be hooked up with just the gearbox, the control box sitting in the back of the boat somewhere, making all the electronics think that it's working, doing its thing. So anyway, those are some issues you got to deal with this application. And really not sure what I want to do. I know I've been sitting here staring at it for a couple hours, trying to decide and figure it out. And I think either way, I'm just going to go with the stock exhaust, leave it the same size. Obviously that's going to have to get moved. So that trim package thing is just after I get everything else figured out. I'll keep in mind it's got to go inside the boat somewhere above the intake itself. So I have to allow for that. Probably just end up building the brackets and the levers and all that crap and trying to make it work through the hole. Anyway, later guys.